Imagine this. You're alone in a quiet room, and the words you've heard thousands of times begin to echo in your mind. Our Father, who art in heaven. They feel familiar, even comforting. But what if I told you these words conceal something far beyond what your eyes and ears can perceive? What if every syllable, every pause was carefully placed there for a reason few truly understand? What would you do if you discovered that this seemingly simple prayer is in fact a key that can unlock doors to dimensions most of us don't even dare to imagine? Would you keep reciting it without question? Or would you be ready to uncover what's hidden right under your nose? Stay with me, because what we're about to explore isn't just an ancient secret. It's something that could change everything you think about yourself and the world around you. Imagine this. You're sitting on an old wooden pew, the air heavy with the scent of incense, as soft murmurs echo around you. You close your eyes and repeat the words without really understanding why. But what if those words were like invisible threads, weaving a web that connects the visible to the invisible, the material to the spiritual, the human to the divine? What if they were more than a prayer, but a carefully designed alchemical formula meant to transform the one who speaks them? Look, before we go on, if you're itching like me and love unraveling what's hidden, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Let's explore this together. Now think with me. What happens when we say something repeatedly? At the most basic level, we know repetition creates habits, shapes our minds, and even influences our behavior. But what if that repetition could also create energetic patterns, invisible geometric forms that vibrate in harmony with the universe? Quantum physics teaches us that everything is energy, right? So why would it be any different with the words we choose to say, especially those charged with intention and deep meaning? I've seen something like this happen myself. Once I was part of a study group on ancient texts and their connections to esoteric practices. One member brought a scroll with Latin inscriptions and symbols that seemed to belong to some kind of alchemical ritual. At the time, I thought it was just a historical curiosity, but then he explained that each word had a specific purpose, like musical notes forming an invisible melody. That's when I realized the Our Father could be exactly that. A symphony of sounds and symbols resonating on levels beyond our immediate understanding. But why is this so important? Because we're talking about something that transcends religion. We're talking about a universal language, a form of communication that spans centuries and cultures. Imagine that at some point in history, someone decided to encode profound truths in seemingly simple words. Words anyone could memorize, but when spoken with intention, they unlock hidden layers of reality. What if I told you there are modern experiments that support this idea? Yes, I'm talking about scientists studying the power of sound and intention. They've found that certain frequencies can alter the molecular structure of water, for example. Now think about this. If sound can influence something as fundamental as water, imagine what it can do to human consciousness. The Our Father, with its specific cadences and rhythms, might be doing just that, tuning our perception to access states of being that are normally out of reach. Here's a question for you. Have you ever stopped to think about what it really means to ask, "Thy kingdom come"? Are we just praying for a distant paradise, or does this phrase contain instructions for manifesting the divine within ourselves? Maybe it's less about waiting and more about creating, less about asking and more about doing. Now let's go back in time for a moment. Have you ever heard of medieval alchemists? Those mysterious men and women weren't just obsessed with turning lead into gold, as many think. They were seeking something much greater, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, the union of the material and the spiritual. They understood that alchemy wasn't just physical, but also mental and spiritual. What if the Our Father were a kind of alchemical recipe? A formula that, when applied correctly, can transform the very essence of a human being. This idea of inner transformation is fascinating, isn't it? But let's go deeper. Imagine that each word of the Our Father is like a portal, an entryway to a different vibrational state. When we say, "Our Father who art in heaven," we're actually invoking something greater than just a distant divine figure. We're tapping into an energy field that permeates everything, a field the ancients called ether, and that modern science might be starting to understand as the fundamental fabric of reality. What if that opening phrase alone were enough to tune our minds to higher frequencies? Now think with me, what would be the purpose of this tuning? Perhaps it's to prepare us for what's next. When we say, "Hallowed be thy name," we're declaring respect and reverence, but we're also activating a profound spiritual principle. In mystical traditions, the name of something contains its essence. By hallowing the name, we're acknowledging and honoring that essence, allowing it to flow into our lives. It's as if we're giving the universe permission to intervene, to bring forth what is aligned with the divine. Here's another question for you. Is "Thy kingdom come" a passive or active declaration? Many interpret it as patiently waiting for better times, but what if it's a practical instruction? What if the kingdom of heaven isn't something that just happens, but something we must manifest here and now? This idea ties back to ancient symbolism of inner temples, sacred spaces within each human where the divine can dwell. By speaking these words, perhaps we're building that temple brick by brick, intention by intention. Returning to the alchemists, they had a curious phrase, "As above, so below." This maxim reflects the idea that everything in the universe is interconnected, that the laws governing the macrocosm also apply to the microcosm. The "Our Father" seems to echo this ancient wisdom when it says, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Here again we see the bridge between the material and the spiritual, the union of two seemingly opposite worlds. But what does it really mean to do divine will? Is it blindly following external orders, or is it learning to listen to the silent voice within us? I remember a story I once heard about a monk living in isolation in the mountains. He spent hours reciting ancient prayers, including the Our Father. One day a visitor asked why he repeated the same words every day when he already knew them by heart. The monk smiled and said, "The words are like candles in a dark abyss. They light the way, but they only work if you're willing to follow the light." That response always intrigued me because it suggests there's something more to the words than their literal meaning. There's a force, an energy that can guide those willing to listen. But what happens when someone decides to explore these mysteries more deeply? I once met someone who spent years deciphering the hidden symbols in religious texts. She showed me a fascinating interpretation of the Our Father involving sacred geometry. According to her, each phrase could be linked to specific geometric shapes, like circles, triangles, and spirals, representing different aspects of creation. Together, these shapes formed a complex pattern resembling a fractal, something infinite and self-similar. That made me wonder, could the Our Father be a kind of energetic map, a visual representation of the underlying order of the universe? What if I told you there are forbidden experiments related to this? I'm not talking about wild conspiracies, but scientific research that was silenced or marginalized because it challenged the status quo. For example, there are reports of scientists studying the impact of words and sounds on human DNA. They found that certain sound sequences can alter DNA structure, activating or deactivating specific genes. While these findings are still controversial, they suggest that sound and intention may play a much larger role in our biology than we imagined. Could the Our Father be one of those sequences, carefully designed to influence our own evolution? Now imagine this. What if every time you repeat these words, you're participating in an ancient ritual that connects you to a global network of consciousness? What if you're not just talking to yourself, but contributing to a collective field that affects all of humanity? This idea is supported by recent studies on morphogenetic field theory, which suggests our thoughts and actions influence shared energy fields. If that's true, then every time someone recites the Our Father, they're adding a new layer to that field, amplifying its strength. Here's another question for you. What happens when you combine faith, intention, and knowledge? Are we just practicing an advanced form of personal psychology, or are we tapping into something that transcends the human? Maybe both are true. This intersection of faith, intention, and knowledge is where things get really interesting. We're talking about something that goes beyond mere word repetition or mechanical rituals. We're talking about an active process of transformation, where each time you recite the Our Father, you're engaging in a silent dialogue with forces far beyond our everyday understanding. What if those forces aren't out there, but within us? What if the Our Father is a tool to access that inner dimension, an echo of who we truly are? Now think with me. When we say, "Give us this day our daily bread," are we only asking for physical food? Or are we acknowledging something deeper, like the need to nourish our soul, mind, and spirit. In esoteric traditions, bread is often associated with the physical body, but also with the subtle body, that part of us existing between the tangible and intangible. By asking for this bread daily, perhaps we're declaring our dependence on the divine to sustain not just our body, but our entire existence on multiple levels. Here's another mystery. Why do we ask for forgiveness while forgiving others? When we say, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us," we're doing something incredibly powerful. We're creating a cycle, an energetic exchange between giving and receiving. But what if this is more than just a moral statement? What if it's a universal law, a cosmic rule governing the dynamic between the human and the divine? The ancients knew this. They understood that forgiveness wasn't just an act of kindness, but a way to release stagnant energy, to unlock patterns that tie us to the past. I remember a personal experience that illustrates this. Once I spent months harboring resentment against someone I thought had betrayed me. No matter how hard I tried to move on, it felt like something was stuck inside me, like a tight knot in my chest. Then I started reciting the Our Father with full focus on the forgiveness phrase. It wasn't immediate, but gradually I noticed that weight beginning to lift. Not because the other person changed, but because I changed my relationship with that situation. It was as if the words had triggered an invisible process of release. But let's return to the idea of cycles. The next phrase, "Lead us not into temptation," can be seen as a plea for protection. We're asking to be shielded from external influences that might lead us astray. However, there's a deeper interpretation here. What if temptation isn't just about worldly desires, but about distractions that pull us away from our true purpose? What if it's about avoiding getting lost in illusions that mask our inner reality? In that sense, this phrase would be an invocation of clarity, a call to stay centered amidst chaos. And now we reach the final part. But deliver us from evil. This phrase, so simple at first glance, carries immense weight. What is evil in this context? Many interpret it as something external, a force opposed to good. But what if it's something more subtle, like the shadow aspects within ourselves? What if it's about transcending those parts of us that limit us, that keep us from reaching our full potential? Here, again, we see the duality between the external and the internal, the visible and the invisible. What if I told you there's a hidden symbol in these words, something that can only be perceived when you look beyond the obvious? Imagine that each phrase of the Our Father is like a step on an invisible ladder, taking you higher with each one. When you reach the final phrase, you've climbed a mountain of meanings, each built upon the last. It's as if the Our Father were a fractal structure, where each part contains the whole. Could this structure be designed to create order from chaos, to align your consciousness with something greater? Here's another question for you. Are we using these words correctly? Are we just repeating them thoughtlessly, or are we truly connecting with their hidden power? Perhaps the secret lies in intention. Maybe it's less about the words themselves and more about the state of being they help cultivate. When you say, "Deliver us from evil," you're declaring your willingness to transcend, to go beyond the limitations imposed by duality. What if I told you there are historical accounts of people using these words as a portal to altered states of consciousness? I'm not talking about extravagant magic, but deep meditative practices involving repetition and focus. There are records of monks, mystics, and even scientists who experienced unusual phenomena while reciting the Our Father with total concentration. They report visions, sudden insights, and even unexplained physical sensations. This suggests there's something more at play here, something our conventional science can't yet fully explain. What if the Our Father were a kind of ancestral technology designed to harmonize the individual with the cosmos? A technology that combines sound, intention, and symbolism to create real changes in human consciousness. If that's true, then we're talking about something that transcends religion and culture, something that belongs to humanity's collective heritage. This idea of an ancestral technology is fascinating because it makes us completely rethink our relationship with the past. We're so used to seeing the modern world as superior, as if everything that came before was primitive or outdated. But what if the ancients knew something we've lost along the way? What if the Our Father is a perfect example of this, a tool designed by minds that deeply understood the connections between sound, intention, and energy. They may not have had advanced microscopes or telescopes, but they had an intuitive wisdom that allowed them to access universal truths using just words and rituals. Now think about this. When you recite the Our Father, you're participating in something much bigger than it seems at first glance. You're joining a millennia-old tradition that crosses cultures, religions, and eras. No matter your background or beliefs, these words have a universal resonance. They speak directly to that part of us that transcends identity, time, and space. It's as if we're connected to an invisible web, a network that unites all human beings throughout history. But here's another reflection. Are we really ready for what these words can unlock within us? Are we prepared to face those parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore? Because in the end, the true power of the Our Father isn't in the words themselves, but in the transformation they catalyze. When we say, "Deliver us from evil," perhaps we're asking to be freed from our own fears, doubts, and limitations. Maybe it's a declaration of courage, a willingness to confront what's deepest within us. What if I told you there's an interesting parallel between the Our Father and certain Eastern mystical practices? In Buddhism, for example, there are mantras that work similarly, repeated sounds that help focus the mind and elevate consciousness. These mantras, like the Our Father, are carefully constructed to create specific vibrational patterns. They're not just pretty words, they're keys that open inner doors. So could the Our Father be considered a Western mantra? A way to access altered states of consciousness available to anyone willing to practice? Let's return to symbolism. I mentioned earlier the idea of sacred geometry linked to the words of the Our Father. But what if we go further? What if each phrase corresponds to a universal archetype, a primordial force existing in both the macrocosm and microcosm? For example, when you say, "Our Father who art in heaven," you're invoking the archetype of the Creator, the source of all life. When you ask, "Thy kingdom come," you're activating the archetype of harmony, the search for balance and order. And so on, each phrase touches a fundamental aspect of human and cosmic existence. What if this isn't just theoretical but practical? Imagine you decide to use the Our Father as a daily personal development practice. You start reciting it not as an automatic habit, but as an active meditation. You focus on each word, feel its energy, visualize its meaning. Gradually, you notice subtle changes in your life. More mental clarity, more inner peace, more connection with others. It's not dramatic or instantaneous, but something that grows slowly, like a plant that needs constant care to bloom. Here's another question for you. What happens when you combine faith with hidden knowledge? Are we just mixing two different things, or are we creating something new and powerful? Maybe it's like alchemy. By combining seemingly opposite elements, we can generate something that transcends both. The Our Father might be exactly that, a fusion of spirituality and occult science, a bridge between the divine and the human. This perspective certainly raises intriguing questions. For example, why do so many people recite the Our Father without even thinking about what they're saying? Are they wasting extraordinary potential? Or is the simple act of repeating the words enough to plant seeds that might sprout later? Maybe it's not necessary to understand everything right away. Perhaps the secret lies in trusting the process, in allowing the words to do their silent work over time. What if I told you there are accounts of even deeper experiences related to the Our Father? There are stories of people who, by reciting it repeatedly during times of crisis, experienced sudden insights or even visions. One man told me that during a particularly difficult period in his life, he began reciting the Our Father every morning as a way to seek comfort. He didn't expect anything beyond a temporary sense of peace, but something unexpected happened. He started dreaming of symbols he'd never seen before, intricate geometric shapes that seemed to pulse with their own light. He didn't know what they meant, but he felt they were important. Years later, while studying sacred geometry, he recognized those symbols as representations of universal principles. This brings us back to the central mystery. What's really happening when we recite these words? Are we just talking to ourselves, or are we participating in something far greater than we can imagine? Perhaps the Our Father is a kind of code, a secret language that connects the human to the divine, the material to the spiritual, the present to the eternal. If that's the case, then we're dealing with something that has the potential to transform not just individuals, but all of humanity. Now you see why this changes everything, don't you? The Our Father isn't just a prayer. It's a portal, a key, an energetic code that can open doors many didn't even know existed. But here's one final question for you. What do you think comes next? If you've made it this far with me, leave Our Father in the comments or tell me if you've ever felt this mystery in your life. I want to know what you think. And now allow me to leave you with something to reflect on. Here's the full text of this powerful prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.